Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is your host, Bob Kirwan, on the Learning Clinic, coming to you from CKLU 96.7 FM in Sudbury at Laurentian University. Again, this is one of our Monday afternoon The Learning Clinic Meet the Candidate radio shows. And this afternoon in the studio for the first hour, we have Paul Stopciati, who is from Ward 9. He's running for council in Ward 9. And at 1 o'clock, we will be having John Rodriguez in the studio, and John is running for the position of mayor. Welcome back, John.
Thank you very much, Robert. It's a pleasure being here.
Welcome back, Paul, sorry.
I know, I've been passed for John many, many times. Thank you very much for having me here, Robert. I really appreciate taking the time to come out here today and speak a little bit about Ward 9 and some of the objectives that we have to face in the future.
Yeah, and the nice thing about where we are right now is we're getting to that point in the campaign where some of the candidates have been in here more than once. And I know in your particular case, we have one video recording of one of our last session. And this will be recording 2, and I'm hoping that over the course of the entire campaign, by the time we get to October, that most of the candidates will have had a chance to come in here 1 or 2 times, and if anyone really wants to get to know the candidates in their wards or the candidates for the position of mayor, then they can go to the learningclinic.ca and they'll actually be able to listen and watch what people are saying. It's almost like a meet the candidates night, where you can go anytime you want, and even fast forward if you don't want to listen to a few of the issues.
Right.
So this is an update, but it's kind of a reminder of what some of the issues are. And now that we've had the provincial election, there may be some things that are looked at in a different perspective than what we've had before. And so I'm looking forward to this. We'll spend the next 30 or 40 minutes and try to put our heads around a few of the things that are going on and see what's happening in Ward 9 and in Sudbury and maybe even in Ontario, figure out how it's going to affect us. So what's new?
Well, Robert, as you mentioned, I guess the provincial election is now over, and it's just about time to start putting on your running shoes and start knocking on doors and get ready for the 2014 municipal election.
Yeah, it's been kind of quiet.
Yes, it has been, and I always said, people were asking me, are you out there talking to people, knocking on doors? Well, yes, I have since January the 1st, but I always said, wait till the provincial election is over, then we start kickstarting the campaign.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to say to date, I have met a lot of people in Ward 9, spoke to a lot of people, and I guess it's very important to listen to what they have to say, and there's no question, we need a change, we need some direction, and we need some efficiencies, and this is what it's all about. And I think, like I mentioned before, in 2010, my slogan was for change and for progress. We had very little change and we had no progress. So I think 2014 is going to be a very, very exciting year, and I can't wait to get in there and put my teeth into the grindstone the way we go.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've been hearing, and I mean, you make a good point, like the fact that you haven't seen a lot of activity doesn't mean there hasn't been a lot of activity. Like, sure, there's not a lot of signs out there, but the signs don't really mean that people are campaigning. And in terms of continuing to live your life and continuing to get involved with people and talk with people, that's going on under the I guess the cloak of there's no public perception that it's going on, but people are talking.
That's right.
And you haven't stopped what you call campaigning. One of the things that I'm starting to hear a lot of is in this whole area of change and this definition of change. And I think the definition of change is starting to evolve into, it doesn't necessarily mean you throw out everybody and bring everybody in. It's a matter of, there has to be a change in the way you look at things.
Exactly.
You don't need to change a person, you just have to change the way you're looking at things. So I think, I'm hoping anyway, that when we get into this change movement, that it doesn't just mean if you've had anything to do with city council, you can't be considered and you got to be totally brand new and inexperienced, because I do think that people who are sitting in council can change. It's just a matter of identifying what the perspective is. So I don't know if you're seeing that kind of thing out there or not, but I think it's starting to come up that's saying, well, what is change? Change doesn't necessarily mean.
I totally agree with you there. I think it's very important to have a council and a mayor that get along. I think I had mentioned this before. You need direction.
Yeah.
You need someone at the helm that will say, okay, let's set 10 objectives or 10 priorities at the start of council, and let's, at every agenda, you list those 10 priorities and those 10 objectives on every council agenda.
Yeah.
And you follow through with them. There has been no follow through, there has been no direction, and people seem to be doing what they want to do, when they want to do it, and that's the big problem.
I think you really hit the nail on the head here when you said, let's set 10 objectives. Like, let us,
Exactly.
not here are the 10 objectives.
And you know what, Robert, I'm gonna tell you something. I think it's very important at the start of council that council and the mayor get together, and we'll call it a retreat or whatever you wanna call it, in Sudbury, okay? We don't have to go to any resort and spend a lot of dollars, in Sudbury, and we focus on what happened, okay? Like some of the objectives that did not go through. We take a look at some new objectives, but I'm not saying 100 or 500 or whatever. I'm just talking about 10 solid, concrete objectives, and and prioritize them.
Okay.
And at every council meeting, we list them, and we let the public know where we stand on these
Yeah.
on these objectives,
Yeah.
and follow through. There has been no, and we need somebody to direct this, and I am prepared to chair that at the first. And you have to do this at the beginning of council, the council term, and let's start moving. Okay, it could be personnel, departments, development, whatever it may be, the areas where we have to focus on, let's prioritize them,
Mhm.
let's list those objectives, and let's go.
And that might be a worthwhile platform or worthwhile issue to even say that if that becomes an issue that we're talking about, and like you say, if you list those objectives and you keep in mind what those objectives are, then all your decisions that you make at council as a group of councilors should probably, well, they would have to be helping move at least one of those objectives forward.
That's right.
So it means all of your decisions then are based on moving those 10 objectives. And I'm convinced that we could probably come up with a good 10 objectives that all ward councilors could agree to as being beneficial to the entire city.
Yeah.
So it's not just, let's get 10 objectives and 2 of the wards are gonna be left out. It's no, what can be done? So it might mean we're gonna improve our green space in our parks. Well, that's not just one ward specific, that's across the system. And I think if we had 10 of those, then our decisions could always be based on, well, we have to make a decision now. How is it gonna affect any one of those 10 objectives? And if it doesn't affect one of those 10 objectives,
That's right.
it's not a high priority.
You see, within the whole Greater City of Sudbury, all the departments, economic development, the finance department, leisure services, these are the areas where we have to focus and pick 10 solid objectives. And you know what? And I'm not talking about staff directing council. I'm talking about the council members hearing it from the public. We can even have a public session, and we know what the concerns are. And we set the objectives, we set the priorities, and we set it on the agenda. We want 10 solid objectives that are going to bring this city forward,
Yeah.
and let's progress. That's what I'd like to see.
Oh, you're right, and for a person, let's say, in your position, if someone was to say to you, well, what are those 10 objectives, Paul? You know, I know if anyone said that to me, I'd say, I don't know what they are yet, because we're gonna develop them as a group.
That's right.
And then for me to come in and say, I'm coming in there with the 10 objectives in mind, I've got an idea what I think is important, but I can't say, these are the 10 objectives I'm gonna push. We've gotta get in as a group and find out exactly what these objectives are and these big goals are that we're all consistent. We may throw 20 on the table and it may only be 10 that we can kind of get a consensus on. Well, those become our big goals.
Exactly, and then this is what would, like, you don't want too many, you want them achievable, you want to be accountable for them, but you want to move them through and make sure they're moved through. I'm sure that this council in place right now, they have some objectives, and we'll have to see how far they are into them, but let's complete them. If they're worthwhile, we'll complete them. If not, we'll shelve them.
And nobody can really put their finger on and say, these are the objectives of this council.
Right.
So maybe this kind of retreat could be held every year to review the big goals.
Right, on
Review
every
the
year,
progress.
but every 6 months, you know, like
Well,
just
maybe,
review.
just so that we make sure that
Right.
are our 10 goals still the 10 goals that we should be working on.
Exactly, but the most important thing is we have to let the public and our community know what we're doing,
Right.
okay, and what the objectives are, and where we are to date on these objectives.
It would make it easier to justify decisions too, if you could point to how your decision is affecting one of the big goals.
Right.
No, I think it would be from transparency, accountability, from all of those buzzwords. I think that might be a pretty good approach. So it's yeah, I like it.
Right.
I imagine you've heard some good positive comments.
Well, you know what, it's funny because, well, you take a look the last 4 years, the way all the disruptions and everything else within council, you know, and that can't happen. We have to work as a team. We have to get together. It doesn't mean you're right, I'm wrong, whatever. We have to hash it out, end it, close the books at the end of the meeting, and start all over again. And, you know, no grudges.
No.
And that's very, very important. And I think that's, you know, I've been to a lot of council meetings, I've been to the last two, and I see what's going on. Even now, after 4 years, everything's all, I hate to say it, but it's like upside down. There's no direction, there's no firm decisions. You see meetings going on for a long period of time where these decisions could have been made within the first 15 minutes. And those are things that you have to, you know, we have to look at and try and work together and try to improve.
Yeah, it's achievable. It's not something that can't be done.
Right.
It should, with a group of 13 people, you should be able to do it.
Right on.
So, yeah, so that's good. Any other big ticket items coming forward that you're finding are starting to
Well,
get a higher
you know,
priority?
it's usual, you know, the roads and you know, like that's a major, like those are things that we have to take a look,
Yeah.
like we don't know much about. And, you know, the Pioneer Manor issue, like, I can't really say, like, you know, a lot of people are saying we'd like to privatize it, we'd like to leave it in the city's hands, whatever. I think we need more information, maybe assess the whole project to see what's really happening with Pioneer Manor. Those are some of the comments coming back from Ward 9. What else?
So there's not just one option?
No,
One
no,
option
it-
for Pioneer Manor.
Exactly. I think there's no question it's costing the taxpayers money to run Pioneer Manor. We see that every year. What can we do to improve that loss? What can we do to gain some efficiency? Try and make it better. I think that we have to work towards that. Now, I'm sure that there is a little bit of work happening there, but there's a perfect objective and a priority is right there. Is
Yeah.
see how we can maintain it
And see
and
when-
service it.
And I think when you're looking at a big goal and you're taking a look at Pioneer Manor, I think lumping in the handy transit service and the transit service to some of the pockets that are in some of the outreach areas where there is no service. I think when you take a look at some of those things, the big goal is, what are some of the services that we're obligated to provide, we should be providing, and if they cost money, we have to absorb the cost because it's something we can't say we're gonna ignore because of the cost. Today there's a article about the staff saying we can't expand the handy transit program, even though it serves about 95% of the people, but there's about 5% of the area that it can't serve. Well, I'm saying, you know what, those 5%, wherever we can't serve, we have to serve them.
That's right.
If we can't just say, no, we're not gonna expand the program because it's gonna cost too much. It's one of those things that I think there's certain things we have to provide as a council and as a city that we have to provide. And we have to find the money to do it, or the efficiencies, but we can't say we're not gonna provide it because we don't wanna spend any more money. So I think when you take a look at Pioneer Manor, and you take a look at it, there's probably a few other areas where it becomes, the big objective is, okay, this is a level of service that we have to provide. So if we're making decisions, are these decisions helping us provide that level of service? If those are the services we've identified that, whatever the cost, we have to provide it.
Mhm.
We cannot get cost recovery on transit,
No.
but we have to provide it. So I think that's a good point, and I think that whole issue of the Pioneer Manor, that might be a good focus for one of those big objectives, because then there's so many other things it kind of brings in.
Right.
The roads, obviously, repairing the roads and all, but that has so many other factors in there now. It's got, we may have to repair our roads and then have to tear it up again because the infrastructure underneath the roads is being damaged. So it's not, anyone who puts new pavement on a road doesn't plan on digging that road up 2 months later to repair the pipes. So how do we make decisions so that we're repairing the pipes prior to putting the pavement on top of them? Is there a way of doing that?
See, that's a good question. You see, like we'll probably never get around that because the cost would be so astronomically high that we wouldn't be able to do it.
No.
And you know yourself now with our liberal government in power now, we rely on a lot of money coming in provincially. We're going to have a tough 4 years ahead of us once we're in there because they're faced with a lot of financial difficulties also. We are, so I think this is where we have to gel together and try for efficiencies. And some of the areas are taking a look at each individual department and see where we can reduce, where we can expand. Like there has to be something happening there.
And there are advantages and benefits to having a majority government in power, but there's some disadvantages. We know that we got 4 years of their policy.
That's right.
So whatever decision they make, we're not looking at, well, somebody could change their mind in 2 years or we're back at the, no, we're there for a good 4 or 5 years.
Mhm.
So you're right. Now we have to say, okay, if that's the policy they've set up, we can't just continue
No.
hoping for the best. We're gonna have to deal with it. I'm hearing some talk about trying to get more of our share of the mining tax revenues. I think, you and I have been around, a few years. I don't remember a time when we haven't been trying to get more of our
Right.
share. of
This has
mining.
been ongoing and ongoing. I don't know what it will take. I know that in the past, even when John Rodriguez was the mayor, he fought hard to try and get that. He's still trying hard to get that. He's a big advocate of that, and there's no question, we should be getting a bigger pie. And how do we go about doing that? Well, that's something that we have to take, I'm not an expert in that, or I don't know, we have to get somebody that really knows a lot about that area to try and help us out to see what we have to do to convince the government of the day to give us some extra funding here.
And it's not just simply a matter of someone saying, I wanna run down there and I wanna demand the money.
No, that's right. That's right.
Like so but we do know that there's a lot of money going under the ground here.
That's right.
That we're not getting our share.
Mhm.
So, and again, that might be one of those realities that we say, we're gonna keep trying for it, but let's not make our plans dependent on getting that revenue.
No.
It-
Because as you said, this has been ongoing for, I remember when my dad worked for Inco, and your dad also worked there too, and they're always saying, look how much rock is coming out of the ground, how come they're not giving us more money? And it was ongoing all the time.
all the time. And so it will continue. I don't think we give up, but whatever tidbits we get, it is not gonna be anywhere close to what we probably should be getting.
No.
So that's another thing, that's a big, I don't know if that, let's go back to those priorities. I don't know if getting more of our share of revenue from the mines would be one of the 10 big ticket items, because it's one of the things that one of our long-term objectives, but I don't think it should use up one of our spaces, because it's such a, like, what decisions do we make at council that will get us closer to getting this money?
That's right.
It's one of those that, yeah, let's make sure there's 10 objectives there that we do have some control over.
You see, we can place that in as an objective, but the thing is, we have to assign someone that would go down to Toronto, or, you know, or, and work, like,
Yeah.
we would have to designate to see how we would form.
It would probably be under the umbrella of maximizing the revenue from the other 2 levels of government.
Right.
And at that point, it could be included in that. So I can see that being part of a bigger package,
Right.
not one on its own. But it not be, like I say, you can't depend on it, because we've been trying. And it's, the other issue that seems to be coming up more and more is the need to stimulate growth. And, you know, we can talk about development charges and talk about development, but if there's no development, if there's no growth, we're not gonna get any revenue from these development charges. So it's the chicken or the egg. I mean, we get increased development charges to $100,000 a unit. If we've got no units being built, we're not getting that revenue.
Well, that's right. And you know, based on our economy here in Sudbury right now, you speak to any developer, our housing market is basically flat. Okay, and it has been flat probably for the last 2 to 3 years. And a lot of these developers, they do have inventory, okay, of homes. And we're asking them, like, we started at 16% increase in development charges. And then again, I have to stress, I've attended a lot of meetings in regards to development charges. And this has been going on and on. There's meeting after meeting after meeting. They started off, I believe, with 3 or 4 key objectives, priorities, okay, that we were gonna seal this off. They get into a council meeting, they open it up again like a can of worms, and I think they ended up with 8 or 9 of them, okay? Then, the last meeting where they were gonna do, you know, the vote was coming on the table, it was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and they ended up with a 2-year freeze, okay? And then phased in the next 3 years of the development charges. Now, I don't know why they couldn't freeze it for 3 years, okay, and then the 3rd year, open it up and let's see where we stand 3 years from now.
Yeah.
But there's again direction, like, I felt that this should have been handled in a couple of meetings, boom, 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 you know, set your priorities, set your objectives, let's do it. No, they brought it back to meetings and meetings and meetings, and then they didn't agree with the study, and then they had another study that came in, so it was back and forth, back and forth. The bottom line is, we have to work with these development. We want development in Sudbury. We want Sudbury to expand. And we put a lot of onus on our developers. I'm not saying that, you know, give them the sun, the sky, the moon, but let's work with them.
Yeah.
They should be meeting with staff. They should be meeting with planning, finance. Everybody get together. How can we make this work? It seems like it's always developers butt-heading with, you know, planning or whatever it may be, whatever department that they're dealing with. It's always back and forth, back and forth.
It's like a negotiation.
Exactly, and there's nothing really being done.
Yeah.
So now, hopefully for the next 2 years, things will be as status quo, and hopefully we'll get these developers moving and try and maybe implement a few more, you know, different ideas or whatever, but I think it's important, very important that finance, planning, development, economic development, and the developers get together, they meet, even if they meet every 2-3 months, and just see where everyone stands and what, you know, you learn a lot from the developers, and the developers learn a lot from staff. So get them together and get them gelled.
One of the things that I've noticed, that especially in a couple of these areas, that the development charge was one, the recreation is another. What's happening is councillors are being presented with a report, a background report. And as soon as that background report is presented, staff is giving a recommendation. So there's not an opportunity for councillors to study the report prior to getting a recommendation from staff. And I think when you were talking about these 8 goals or these 10 goals and objectives, I think what may happen that might solve a lot of this back and forth in negotiations is if you could get the background report so you're educated as to what is there. And then councillors can come back with what they want.
Mhm.
And then staff goes and comes back with their report based on what councillors are saying, go and do this for us. Then I think what's happening is you've got the councillors saying, this is the direction that council wants. Now you go back and tell us what you have to do to get it. And I think at that point then staff would be coming in with recommendations that are consistent with what council has already directed them to go and look at.
I agree, Robert. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
What's happening now
That's
is we're getting the staff recommendations, council's got a couple of weeks to say, I don't really like all of these recommendations, they're coming back with theirs.
Mhm.
Staff then is going back to get a report back on what council is saying, staff is coming back with another report that supports their original recommendations.
And then the other night, the Builders Association came out with another recommendation, like a day before the meeting.
Mhm.
Okay, so, and that's what I'm saying, it opened up a can of worms because there's too many, I don't, you know what it was, the bottom thing? I personally feel it was lack of communication all around.
Yeah.
Okay, and there wasn't enough,
And-
there was probably a lot of work done, but I don't think it was distributed to the right people, and it wasn't shared,
Yeah.
and people weren't able to have an open forum on it, based on what was
And they had
happening.
to make a decision.
That's right.
You couldn't defer the decision. So you're getting all this new information, but you have to make a decision based on what you know. And that's the other thing, is how much in advance should you be getting these reports? Everything just seems to be on a as-needed basis and when needed basis. So, I mean, you can blame councillors a bit, but possibly the blame they have is not forcing more time for these reports to come forward so they can come in with their own directives to staff. I mean, staff has got the knowledge, they've got the time to do all of these big reports. How much time does it take to do a 150-page report? I can just imagine what the cost of those are, and I'm hearing it doesn't cost anything, staff do them.
Right.
Well, wait a minute, you're paying staff time.
No,
Like, but I'm hoping that might be a solution to some of the problems. Is the council comes in and says to staff, we have to deal with development charges. This is what we as a councillor want. Go back, tell us how we can get it done. Now, you've got a chance to pick from the options that you set up. And it's a whole different, I think it's a different way of doing it. Because that's where you're getting into the arguments between councillors and staff and then the fear saying, well, we can do what you want, but it's gonna cost $2 million.
That's right.
And council's gotta be scared. They're not gonna make a decision when they've been told that there's a consequence. So, you know, it will be an interesting 4 years going forward, unless, like you say, you have that idea right at the beginning, this is what our group has decided.
That's exactly, that's what you have to do. You have to set objectives, and you have to follow through. I think that's
Yeah.
the biggest
Oh,
thing
yeah.
is, and I would put those 10 objectives on every,
Yeah, it's almost like a mission statement.
exactly, right on. And then it's in your mind, it's in the public's mind, well, where are you on that one? Or where are you on number 5? And how is that happening? You know, like, I think, and that's how things are gonna,
Yeah.
will get done.
Yeah, it's
And,
totally agree with you. It's,
and if there's changes that have to be made, you do it at the beginning of the term of council. Like if you're dealing with personnel issues, or you're dealing with something that has to be done that, within a department or whatever, you do it right at the beginning of term. This way here, you have 4 years to work
Yeah.
ahead.
no, totally agree.
And I think in the first meeting, everyone gets around the table and everyone is on the same page, and let's make this happen. Let's be a team. We'll leave all our dirty bags on the side. Fine. We're not all gonna be liked or wanted or whatever at times, but you know what? At the end of the day, we can go out and have a meal and have fun.
Yeah,
I think that's the big thing.
there's one winner,
That's right.
not a bunch of losers.
Right on. And that's what we have to build a morale up, and we have to, work towards making this city the best we can.
Yeah, and I always come back to that term that I think Jim Gordon used, that, finding out what the silent majority really wants.
Right.
And so as counselors, we really have an obligation to get out and pay attention to the signs and what we're hearing, and not just rely on town hall meetings where 5 people show up and they give you their opinion and feel that those 5 people are speaking for everybody. You gotta get out and listen, even into the crowds and the community events, and not just listen to the people we're talking to, but listen to the group over in the corner there that even doesn't know you're listening, and find out exactly what their concerns are. So again, comes down to another issue is, is it fair to expect counselors to do this part-time? Because you've got so much reading to do, so much preparation to do, so much community work to do in order to know what the community is thinking, that if you've got a lot of other commitments, it's difficult, and you're then really eliminating an awful lot of people who might be good counselors from even considering a job.
Well, there's no question. Being a counselor, you definitely have to manage your time. I own a business, and I've always been involved in volunteering, been on different boards, and you know what? It takes time, and thank God I do have the time in my business. I have a successful business, so the spare time I have, I always try to work towards helping someone or doing something, or in regards to volunteering my time. But there is no question, I know that in 2010, when I ran for council, I knew how much time it took from my business and how much time it takes away from your family. And I know that once you're in there, it's even maybe 10 times more. But this is something that I chose, and my family's very pleased I'm doing that. And so you're right. It's going to take a lot of time, and these 4 years are going to be tough times, and there'll probably be more meetings than what's going on now, because there's going to be more challenges.
Yeah.
So that's something that we have to, people have to understand. Like, it's nice, we're seeing a lot of activity, a lot of people throwing their names in to become a counselor. But you know what, once you're in there, it's a different story. I know from past experience, just belonging to organizations, it takes time. And to be a good member, you have to take the time. And to be a good counselor, you have to take the time. There's no question.
See, one of the things that I've been noticing is that when you take a look at the time commitment and everything, a current council cannot make a decision to go full-time. You gotta make the decision for the next council, or else you might as well just line yourself up in a corner and say, come and get me. Mm-hmm. But I'm almost positive, as positive as anything, that I can show that the 12 full-time counselors would be less costly than 12 part-time counselors, based on the amount of time and overtime the staff have to put in to attend meetings, because counselors are not available during the day. And that's time in lieu, or that's overtime. And so when you need staff that have to stay beyond the normal workday, you're compensating them either with extra pay or time off during the day. So if you had full-time counselors, you were able to meet with the staff and the committees during their working day, you would reduce financially. It would probably, I'm positive it would be less costly to have your full-time counselors available to meet during the normal working day than if you had staff having to put in overtime to go to these evening meetings and things like that. And so this round, that might be a pet project. Saying, okay, let's investigate and let's see. Because if we can show financial savings in 2018, then let's put it on the table.
That's a good point. Like, that's something that a study can take place throughout the term council.
It's easy.
See if, exactly.
It's easy. You just have, what's the time in lieu, or what's the overtime we pay because of committee meetings that have to be held, because counselors that are on those committees are not available during the day.
Mhm.
And that's significant. You add an extra $40,000 or $50,000 a year to a counselor, then all of a sudden, you've got a lot of people who are sitting at home who are qualified and really should be putting their name forward to give the city a choice, or give the ward a choice, and they just can't. They can't afford to sacrifice their career and their families. And to me, I think that would open up a whole new group of people who would be available.
Right.
So it would be definitely a change, and it doesn't need a ward, like a counselor at large philosophy.
Right.
It just needs, let's see if it's gonna cost more. And let's not just say, yeah, you're gonna have to pay counselors more, so that's how much money you're gonna have to pay. No, how much money are you gonna save?
That's right.
And at your council meetings, your counselors will be better prepared, because they would have had time to read these reports,
That's right.
study these reports.
That's a good point, because you take a look, even throughout the day, how many phone calls a counselor would take. Okay, you have an 8-hour job per day, and no matter what you do, it's pretty hard getting back to these, it's either in the evenings or early in the morning.
Mhm.
And, you have to really be flexible, but there's a lot of calls that you have to return, and I'll tell you, that's very, very important.
Yeah.
Because I know in Ward 9 right now, I'm getting a lot of calls myself, because people know me that I ran in 2010. They know that I return my calls, they know that I contact, it's been a really good learning experience for me, because if they can't get a hold of Councillor Craig, they call me.
Yeah.
And that's fine, I love that. If they give me a call, they'll say, well, look, I can't get a hold of Councillor Craig, but Paul, I know that you will follow up on this, can you do this for me?
Yeah.
And I can name a list of things I have done for people in the past 4 years and up to even the last 6 months. And it's good experience, and I have the time, I do it in between whatever I have to do.
You can do it during the day between that.
That's right, and it's good experience, I get to meet people, and it's good.
And I like the idea that it would allow for a lot of calls during the day, when people know that they can get hold of you, and you'd be able to immediately be able to get contact with the staff member who has to answer.
Right.
Whereas if you're getting the calls in the evening, it doesn't mean counselors will not get calls in the evening, you'll still get the same number of calls, but you would have more of an opportunity to communicate with the people who have
Right on.
the answer.
And you know what, like, people are calling the 311 line, or they're calling staff or whatever, and then I get a call back and they say, well, listen, nobody's getting back to me. There is a problem, I believe, in departments getting back to people. And I don't know what the problem is, I'm still trying to find out why. But I made a couple of calls in my business, trying to get people to call me back, and it's 3, 4 days, 5 days later. But now what I do, I tell them who I am, I get a reference number of my complaint,
Mhm.
and I make sure that within a day or two, no one gets back to me. I call them back, and I keep calling. This is reference number, what's happening? Can you get somebody there, or can you call me back
Right,
and let me know if this gentleman's on holidays or whatever?
yeah.
But there's an area that we have to find a better way of staff getting back. I don't know if they do that to the rest of the councillors, or getting back to people that have a major problem, or even a problem.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break and play a couple commercials, and then come back and wrap this up, and see, if there's a couple of things that we want to talk about before we move forward. So remember, you're listening to the Learning Clinic on CKOU 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Bob Kirwan, and with me this afternoon is Paul Stopciati. We will be back momentarily.
That's a good point you made there about full-time.
And welcome back to the Learning Clinic on CKOU 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Bob Kirwan, and we are going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so this interview with Paul Stopciati from Ward 9, running for council in Ward 9. Paul, we've addressed some, I think, some fascinating concepts here, and I think I can guarantee as much as there's gonna be an election in October, that we're gonna have you back in at least 1 or 2 or 3 more times before the election, because I like the idea that what we're doing here is really exploring some issues and ideas, and whether they're part of your platform or there's something that everybody should be thinking about and considering, they're worth talking about. So in the last few minutes, are there any other specific things that you think we should be talking about and dealing with, I guess, moving forward in the immediate future?
Well, I think, you know, it's very, very important to, we have to be accountable. This new council that takes place in October, we have to be accountable to the public. And I think it's very, very important that we follow through in what we say. I think we have to be honest. You know, it is going to be a tough 4 years. We had Rick Bartolucci here as our MP for a number of years. They were the party of the day. Now we have the Liberals in power. We have NDP in power here in our area. Are we going to get the same value for our dollar? Who knows? Well, we hope we will. You know that the party of the day, whoever has their member, it's always beneficial. But that's another thing we have to take a look at also. We have to make sure that we get our fair share of the dollar coming from our provincial government, and try and see what we can get from our federal government. And we have a number of projects.
And what's done is done, so.
That's right. And so, you know, there's a lot of things that we have to take a look at. And there's a bit of a mess that we have to clean up once we get in there to see what is left from the previous council. So those are all, you know, we have to have strong shoulders, and we have to bear down and all work together as a team. We have to move forward. We have to look after our developers. We have to look after our businesses. We're going to have a referendum. What's going to happen to our retail stores? Okay, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a lot of work.
And I think, and really correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I'm hearing you say is that it's very difficult for any candidate to be able to say, this is exactly what I'm going to do, and it's exactly what I'm going to hold on to, because you have to have the ability to get in there and examine what the status is, and then determine the best course of action moving forward. I think you can have an opinion on certain things, and you can say, this is an area that I'd like to work on. I'd like to improve accountability.
Mm-hmm.
But for you to be able to say, we're gonna improve accountability by doing 1, 2, 3, 4, well, that's okay, but you're one of 13.
That's right.
So if you say improve accountability, now let's get in there and see what are the things we can do
Right.
to improve accountability. And so I'm hoping that at the end of the day, the 13 people around there have those leadership abilities to be able to say, let's deal with the challenge. And when we move forward, make the best decision we can. And as I like what you're saying, and let's hope it's achieving what we want to do in order to move us closer to the ultimate goal that we want for the city, whatever those ultimate goals are. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next few months and getting you back in and getting the other councillors in. It's exciting to hear all the different ideas and thoughts and see the commonalities that are arising among councillors. So. Or candidates. So at the end of the day, people are going to have to take a look at the candidates and say, you know what, we have to pick the person we think is going to have the ability to do what they're all saying.
You know, and that's important. Like I know myself, I've attended numerous council meetings, and when I ran in 2010, prior to that, I followed municipal politics. It's something I had dear in my heart while in my volunteer days, and this is the next step. And I am prepared to do whatever it takes to become a counselor and be a good counselor and listen to the people, be honest. That's number one. And like I said, you're not going to be liked by everyone, but you're going to put, you know, you have to think.
And you have to feel good about yourself, about what you're doing.
Right on. And
I think that's your number one voter.
That's right. That's right.
You know, that's been great. I thank you again for coming in. I can't wait to listen to this again, because we talked about a lot of good ideas. For people who have been listening, if you didn't catch the whole show or you wanna listen to some of these ideas again, go to thelearningclinic.ca, probably tomorrow, thelearningclinic.ca, and the video will be up, you'll be able to listen to various things that have been said, and you'll be able to see Paul's other video as well. So we will make sure that this entire site continues to accumulate with the visits that have been arranged with the candidates. And today at 1 o'clock, in about 12 minutes, we have John Rodriguez coming in for his first time. He is going to be talking about his platform and what he expects to do as mayor of the city of Greater Sudbury if he gets elected. So, thanks, Paul. It's been fun.
Thank
You're
you
going to be
very
thinking
much.
about a lot of things here now.
Thank you very much, Robert. It's always a pleasure being here, and I look forward for the next invite.
Great. The Learning Clinic, Meet the Candidate Show on CKLU 96.7 FM. We will be back in about 12 minutes with John Rodriguez.
Perfect.